Good tidings, everyone. This is Michael Govier from the Hey, it's Enrico Palazzo Fantasy Baseball Podcast, and you're listening to Pop Goes Your World.
If you haven't already, subscribe on iTunes, and while you're there, please leave us a rating and review.
And now, it's time for our feature presentation.
I'm Chris McBrien, and the pop culture from Generation X is everything to me.
And I'm Derek Myers, and I'm here to educate Chris on the great pop culture of today's generation.
Episode 318, Dr. Strangelove Movie Review. Chris McBrien along with Derek Myers, and this is Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations. Another movie review this time. Last time it was over to me, and I did the 80s film classic Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo. So this time, Derek, it was over to you, and you decided that we would go back and watch the 60s film classic Dr. Strangelove, which, I guess you could argue was a more important film than Breakin' 2 Electric Boogaloo, but...
Yeah, I felt, again, highs and lows in life, and I figured I needed to give our podcast a little more credibility after what happened during last week's show.
A little more gravitas.
There you go. That's
all right. Exactly. Well, before we get to the film, Derek, what pop culture have you been able to take in since we were last in the studio together?
Not a lot, not too many compared to what we normally do. Mm-hmm. I had a chance over the last week or so to catch up on a new TV show that dropped in September. Mm-hmm. It's called High Potential. They did 13 episodes, first season. It's done now. They're all now available on Disney Plus, so I was able to binge them commercial free. Again, it's your typical police procedural. The premise is that in the first episode, there's a woman who's hired as the cleaning lady and in a police station, and she accidentally knocks over a file. And as she's cleaning up, she's looking at it and she realizes the police have missed some obvious clues. So she sort of writes it on the whiteboard. And then, of course, sort of a Goodwill Hunting thing. They're like, why are you vandalizing and graffitiing our thing? And she's like, because you guys made mistakes. And then it turns out she's like got 160 IQ. She's a super genius, but because of that, she doesn't stay focused very long and has had to work all these weird jobs over time. And she's got 3 kids, blah, blah, blah. Long and the short, they end up bringing her on as a consultant because, of course, she's able to see things that none of them can see. She's able to make connections none of them can make. And then it runs for 13 episodes. It reminded me very much of the Sherlock Holmes series on the BBC that's just called Sherlock with Benedict Cumberbatch. It's sort of that same idea, the way that they present this main character in the show. Her name is Morgan in this High Potential show. And it was very much like Sherlock Holmes, where, they bring her in, she looks at the crime scene, she picks up details, she sees little clues. And because she's got this photographic memory and she's got this genius level IQ, she can call up these weird, bizarre facts like, oh, well, like in one of the ones, she knows immediately that a video security camera has been doctored because the date on the camera shows wind blowing from east to west. And she's like, well, on that day, there was a storm and the wind was blowing from north to south. It's like just these weird little details. So again, it's your typical sort of police procedural with, essentially a superhero who has this, ability to call on all these things. And there's a fair amount of, your typical main TV network drama going on. The main character is played by Caitlin Olsen, who most people probably will know from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Not a show I'm a fan of, but I am aware of it. She's the main star of the show, and I think she's a producer as well, if I remember correctly. Anyway, it ran 13 episodes. It's available on Disney Plus. It got picked up for season 2, so you'll be able to watch season 2 next year. It was a pretty decent little show. And then the only other thing I had a chance to watch, so Chris, as we've talked about before, we have access to Pluto TV, which has all these old Pluto TV. Yeah, it has all these old classic shows.
I was just watching it tonight.
Yeah, well, and I watch it a fair bit myself.
I was watching Family Feud, the old one.
I was too.
Yeah,
I was too. So anyway, I was watching it the other night, flicking around, and on one of the science fiction channels, they were showing Battlestar Galactica from the 70s, and they had started them from episode 1. Episode 1 was on the other night. And I just happened to be flicking through. So I never really watched the show when it was on. So I watched it a little bit. I was like, okay. And I'm like, not really my jam. But in the early 2000s, they did like a reboot reimagining of Battlestar Galactica. And I thought I've been wanting to go back and revisit it. So this sort of encouraged me to do that. So I thought, well, let me find it. It is not available on any of the streamers. But the good news is I own all the DVDs. So physical media to the rescue. I sat down and I watched what was essentially the pilot or mini series that relaunched this show. It was a 3-hour mini TV movie pilot, whatever. I think it was 2 90-minute episodes got smushed together. Anyway, I had a chance to watch that 3-hour pilot the other night, and man, oh man, it is good and it holds up, and it's fun to go back and see a lot of those performers who are so much younger, because many of them have gone on to have pretty good careers. And it's just like you see them, they're really young, they're really skinny, they're so naive, they don't realize like, hey, this show is actually going to be a pretty big hit for sci-fi. And again, even the special effects, some of the special effects are a little dated. You can sort of tell, like some of the new Cylons are like, the robots, and it's like, that looks a lot. But the space stuff looks great. The starship battles look great. Just the way they shoot it. And I mean, they got James Edward Olmos and oh my God, I'm blanking on the woman's name from Dances with Wolves. What's her name? The main girl, Mary McCormick, I think. No, Mary.
Yeah, I think
something.
that's right.
Anyway, she's the main female lead. Like the two of them, even in just the first couple hours of the first couple episodes, it's like, man, they are great. And yeah, it's really good. I'm really looking forward to going back and re-binging this series. So that's all I had a chance.
So let me ask you. So you like the reboot one, but what did you think of the original? You watched the premiere episode, which at the time it was a 2-hour premiere that they did, and they actually they released it in theaters as a feature film because Star Wars was so popular. So they did that. But what did you think of that one?
So when I was watching it, they said it was episode 1, parts 1, 2, and 3, and I caught most of part 3. So I didn't actually see it from the beginning. But I'm familiar with the lore, so I kind of was glad I didn't jump in right at the very, very beginning. It was fine, and then over the next couple of days, though, as I was flicking back and forth on Pluto TV, I was jumping into other episodes, and it was interesting to see, like, how some of the characters were originally conceived of in the show, the original show, knowing in my mind how they were reimagined in the new show, and even some of the episodes I'm watching, and I'm going, oh, they did sort of a similar take on this in the new show, so it's clear that. It's clear that the people that did the new show in the 2000s were fans of the old one, or were at least aware of the old one enough to be like, we could retell this story. It's been 30 years, but we could retell this story in the new version, and it'll still hold up for these reasons. So from that point of view, it was kind of neat.
And in the new ones, like Starbuck is a female, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes,
I've never seen the new one. But
Katie Stackhoff. Yeah.
Yeah, because Dirk Bendick played Starbuck in the original. So,
yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So that was it. I watched TV this week. I didn't actually watch any movies, although I did start watching The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. I'm only about halfway through, and I'm really loving it. But next week we'll talk more about it.
That's the one where they're like, badges. We don't need no stinking badges.
Oh, is that the one? Okay,
that's
I haven't got to that part yet.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so I got something. This past weekend, Derek, you and I obviously were able to get together and go on a trip around the Toronto area, visiting comic book stores together. And then we hit a Comic-Con together on Sunday. As my wife likes to point out to me, I'm a nerd, So I was on a mission to try and find crazy magazines to add to my collection. I'm sure most people know about Mad and even Cracked, the humor magazines that were popular in the 70s and 80s. And they had like movie parodies and satires at TV and pop culture stuff. No, I liked Mad and I liked Cracked, but my favorite was Crazy. It was done by Marvel. So I've been trying to go back and collect them all. And I thought, I was hoping that some of the many comic book stores in the Toronto area might actually have some old issues kicking around. Yeah, no, they didn't. So then we went to the Comic-Con on Sunday, and again, I got skunked. But you made out pretty well. You added to your Batman collection. But the thing is, I didn't come away empty-handed because I got a Happy Days lunchbox and a Tauntaun, which I immediately came home, put on my shelf with my Hoth Han Solo figure right in the saddle. So it was
Nice.
perfect. It was in good condition too. It's got all the whole the rubber saddle and everything on it. So yeah, I was pretty happy with that. So.
What did your Happy Days lunchbox have? The original thermos?
No, there was no thermos in it, unfortunately. But I mentioned it to a colleague of mine, and they're like, "Please bring your lunch to work in that thing." And I'm like, I'm thinking, you know what? I think I'm going to do that. What do you think? You think I should do it?
I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily leave it unattended. Someone might steal it.
Exactly, but I'm seriously thinking about taking my lunch to work like tomorrow or this week in my Happy Days lunchbox. So that's what I'm going to do. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. And then tomorrow we got this.
Here's your dad joke of the week.
So Derek, I went into a coffee shop and they had a sign there that said, "No Wi-Fi. Pretend it's 1973." So I paid 10 cents for my coffee and I lit a smoke.
You never left 1973, so that probably wasn't that difficult for you.
True. Oh, I knew it. I'm f***ing overdressed.
Let's put him in a movie.
Well, if you don't make any calls, you don't make any sales.
Don't think of me as an I'm not trying to be an
The four of us knew it would be great.
Is it a fargan trick question?
It's a fargan trick question, you ice hole.
Song and dance man.
Can you spot me at 20?
Thumbs down.
There was a track, and there was Vegas, but like f***ing park or a movie. Like f***ing forget it.
Not necessarily things that make for, good podcasting.
Okay, Derek, it was over to you to nominate a movie for us to watch and review. You tend to normally go with newer movies, but every once in a while, you like going way back and reviewing a classic film. You had us do The Great Escape a few years ago, I remember. Mm-hmm. And now this week you wanted to go back to 1964 to watch Dr. Strangelove or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. I think for brevity's sake, we'll just refer to it as Dr. Strangelove. Okay?
That's fair.
So I had never seen this movie in its entirety. I was very aware of it. Like I knew the broad strokes and even some of the details of it. But I got the chance to sit down and watch the film from start to finish, this week. I just watched it today, actually. But before we get into our review, maybe you can just kick us off and maybe just explain why you wanted to watch and review this movie.
Sure. So I've been reading some things and watching some things lately where there seems to be a lot more focus put on movies that have to do with political conflict and potentially world wars and things like nuclear war. Like obviously in the 80s, especially, you going through the Cold War, you had everyone was all worried about oh my God, the world could end and Russia and the US could go to war. There could be nuclear bombs and all that. In light of the world we live in, and in light of changes that are happening, primarily in the US, but by extension, the world around them, since President Trump has come back into power, there's been a lot more discussion about things like this. In some cases, in political forums, but in the case of myself, I listen to a lot of pop culture podcasts. I read a lot of stuff on pop culture websites, and I'm finding that this idea is permeating back into pop culture. And as art will often imitate life, and as art will, in many cases, even drive pop culture in certain directions, when things happen very, very quickly, it takes a while for that to catch up. So I think in light of a lot of unexpected things happening in the world, the first reaction is let's look back. Let's look at some of these things. And a lot of this stuff from the 80s and even into the 90s a little bit is coming back to the forefront of pop culture. And so I started thinking about that. I'm like, maybe we should look at some movies that deal with this idea. And I had a short list, and then I saw Dr. Strangelove was actually in the lineup on one of the channels, and I was like, you know what? I think maybe that's a better place to start. If we're going to look at a couple of these kinds of movies over the next little while, which I think we might, let's start with one of the earliest, one of the most, you could arguably say one of the best ones. And it's, like you said, it's a classic for a lot of reasons. It was nominated for a lot of prestigious awards, including Best Picture, Best Director. It's directed by Stanley Kubrick. So it's definitely a capital F film, as opposed to some of the other movies we do on this podcast, like last week's Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo, probably not falling into that capital F for film, but definitely a capital F to do with that one.
No, man, it was political. They had to rally the whole community to try and save miracles.
Yeah, sure. We'll go with that. So in any case, and I knew you hadn't seen it. So I have a list of some big movies over, like, because when I go back and listen to our old episodes, occasionally we'll talk about a movie and you'll say, oh, I've never seen that. And I make a note of it. And so I have this short list of movies that you've mentioned over time that you've never seen that I thought, you know what, when the time's right, we're going to watch this, because it's always good when one of us has never seen the movie before. I find that makes for a more interesting discussion, even if we both enjoyed it or even if we both hated it. But I knew this was one you hadn't seen before. I know you're a big movie guy, so I knew, you know, you're gonna want to watch it if for no other reason than just to check it off your movie list. So for all of those reasons, that was sort of why I put it to the forefront. I'm sure we'll have a lot to discuss about the movie itself and how the times we live in may still be accurately reflected in this movie or vice versa. But for starters, what were your impressions?
Yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah,
oh my God, it was good. And it hits all the right notes. It's funny. Oh my God, is this movie funny? And it is more relevant today than it was 61 years ago.
I agree.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I'm watching it, you know, through today's lens, and we'll get into that a bit more later, I'm sure. But watching it, like, with everything that's going on in the States right now, like you're watching this movie thinking, how can there be such incompetence and like just humor like that should not be funny coming out of the highest levels of government in, like, you know painfully important, you know, situations. And meanwhile, it happens every single day south of the border right now in 2025. Yep. So it's like, this is happening every day. It's like real life. It's like watching a friggin' documentary of the Trump regime. So anyway, one thing we like to do is we like to go back and take a look at the box office from that year. So I looked up 1964. Number one film, and I usually ask you what it is, but this is
I only looked up the Oscars for that year. Yeah. So I see My Fair Lady's in there. I'm imagining that was the number one movie.
The number one movie was actually Mary Poppins.
Okay, that makes sense.
$102 million. My Fair Lady was number two. Sure. Goldfinger was number three.
James Bond.
Yeah, nice. The Carpetbaggers was number four. And another James Bond movie, From Russia with Love, was in the top five. And then to round out the top 10, there was Father Goose, A Shot in the Dark. Interesting. What a Way to Go, The Unsinkable Molly Brown, and The Pink Panther, number 10. Again,
another Peter
interesting.
Sellers,
huh? Yeah. Number 11 was Viva Las Vegas with Elvis. And
Elvis Presley.
The reason I go outside the top 10, because then number 12 is Dr. Strangelove. So it finished,
okay, good.
It finished pretty close. It was in the, just outside the top, 10.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I think we should probably start with Kubrick, with the director, because,
I think we've done a few of Kubrick's movies on this podcast, but yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, because I mean, what have we done of his? I mean, we
did The Shining.
We did The Shining, but that was it.
Really? I'd have to look up.
Did we do 2001: A Space Odyssey?
I don't think we did.
So no, I don't think we did. My wife hates that movie. I mean,
did we do Full Metal Jacket?
Nope. No, I think we just did The Shining.
I watched Full Metal Jacket. Okay, well then I guess we've only done one Kubrick. We'll have to correct that in the year to come.
I think we probably should. It's probably safe to say one of the most influential directors in movie history. Right?
Yeah, I mean, love him or hate him, he's left his mark on the world.
So he got started directing a couple of short films and then a few smaller features. It wasn't until 1957 with Paths of Glory that he really broke through. Mm-hmm. And then after that, he did Spartacus, and then Lolita, then Dr. Strangelove, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Clockwork Orange, Barry Lyndon.
Did we do Clockwork Orange on this podcast?
Nope.
Oh my God, how have we not done that either? Holy cow.
And then after The Shining, he did Full Metal Jacket and Eyes Wide Shut. So he's had like quite the career, and his career is like spans some really interesting genres. Like when you think of something like Lolita, and then 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then The Shining, like all very different films. So, I don't know. Where do you think this ranks up with all of his other films?
I mean, to your point,
could you rate like 1, 2, 3?
His body of work is so different, that it's kind of hard to put them out there. I mean, for my personal favorites, let me think. So I'm just looking at his list here. I mean, this would probably be in my top 3. I think I would probably have to put Clockwork Orange at number 1, and probably Full Metal Jacket. No, Clockwork definitely number 1. probably The Shining at number 2, and then Dr. Strangelove at number 3, I think. Oh, he did Spartacus too, though. Jeez, man, that's a tough question. I think Strangelove's probably still my number 3. It's just a matter of who are the 1 and 2 ahead of there.
So you have the Shining at. So you're saying Clockwork Orange is 1.
Yeah, I think that's hands down. That's going to be my number 1.
And then
I think Spartacus would be my number 2. And then Strangelove would be 3. And then Shining and Full Metal Jacket would be 4 and 5. And that would probably flip-flop depending on the day of the week.
Wow, I would probably go 2001: A Space Odyssey number 1.
Really?
Yeah, just because it's just so different and just so cinematic in so many ways. It's just something else. That'd be number 1. I think this might be number 2, Dr. Strangelove.
Yeah, no, it's
that good.
It.
And probably The Shining number 3 for me. That's probably how I'd rank him out. I thought it was interesting how this film was shot in black and white, because he made Spartacus in color and then went back to black and white for his next 2 films after that, with Lolita and then this one. And so I was like looking into it. I was reading what like some reasons why he might have used black and white. Might have had to do with, remember the opening scene where the jet refueling takes it? That was footage that he was able to get his hands on.
Yeah, stock footage.
And because it was existing footage, it was in black and white. So he's like, well, I got to match that. So we'll just go with black and white. And then also I read about how, remember the handheld camera scenes during the attack on the Air Force Base? You know, black and white cameras were apparently smaller and easier to handle back then. So that was another reason, apparently. But I think regardless of the reason, or if those reasons are even legit, I think the film just works better this way.
Oh, I agree.
Like, black and white films rely on totally different techniques to tell their story. You know, lighting and the shadows and all that. And it's like so much more stark and artistic. So I just think it works better.
I find with a black and white movie, maybe not so much with classic black and white, but when modern directors choose to shoot in black and white, I find often by doing that, you have to really, it sort of makes you a little more hypersensitive to the dialogue, because your eyes almost have a little bit of a break where they're not being bombarded with all this color. And I find that in many, not all cases, of course, but in many cases, the dialogue is then, it carries that much more emphasis and weight and power. Now, of course, with the black and white, you have the lights and darks and you know, the shadow and all that stuff, which you can definitely play with, and Kubrick certainly does in this one. But I find with the black and white, it's like I'm almost expecting that the dialogue to make up for the absence of color and carry sort of some more of the power of the film. And I do think in this one, it definitely does that as well.
Yeah, I agree. The dialogue definitely doesn't let you down in this one. Oh man, the dialogue is really, really good.
There's some great lines in this.
I made a note of the opening credit sequence. I thought it was interesting. It was almost like chalk drawings. The way that it was very interesting to me. It was and I was paying
attention to, it wasn't, as far as I could tell, it wasn't just a font that was handwritten and used in over and over. Like every letter was different, because I was looking at a letter like S, which appeared over and over again. Every time there was an S, they were all a little different, because some screens had multiple S's in the names and the titles. And it wasn't just like, oh, well, that's clearly a typeface or a font that they've copy and pasted. Like somebody legit wrote these out by hand, one by one. And again, it just adds to that authenticity of it.
I liked how right after the opening credits, there's a disclaimer. And it basically says the Air Force has claimed that, you know, this scenario is impossible and could never happen in real life. You know, so like basically they're saying the government could never be so bumbling and inept that, you know, something real bad could happen. And just like we said earlier, anyone who thinks that clearly has never seen the current Trump administration in action.
Yeah.
I mean, just this week, the Secretary of Defense, the Vice President, and the head of the CIA inadvertently added a journalist to a group chat on an iPhone app and disclosed top war plans. Like, just can't even get over it. And
and I was reading that after this movie came out, the U.S. government actually reviewed and made substantive changes to their procedures to make sure that something like this couldn't happen. That, you know, people who needed to get in touch with higher levels of command and higher levels of government in an emergency had a way to do it, and weren't stopped by little things like, I don't have enough pocket change to make the phone call, you know, and things like giving one person the ability to overstep their authority by such a huge amount that there were no other checks and balances in place. Now, I'm not saying they perfected it, but the story goes that changes were made because of the absurdity of this satire, that it actually made the people in power question the reality and make legit changes, which, hey, when art can change the world, fantastic. It's doing what it's supposed to do.
Well, and like I mentioned, like this past week, Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense of the United States, does all this stuff and discloses all this stuff inadvertently to the press. I'm reminded, watching this movie, the scene, it's early on when George C. Scott is in the hotel bathroom and his mistress is there, and she takes the phone call and she starts yelling.
His secretary.
Yeah. She's like yelling these top secret plans across to him. I'm like, oh, geez. Yeah. You can easily watch this and go, this is so far-fetched. But the current U.S. government is Dr. Strangelove. It is this movie. And there's a quote in it where Sterling Hayden says, war is too important to be left to politicians.
Yep.
The same is true today. But the thing is, although there's so few actual politicians in the current American government, you could almost say like war is too important to be left to ex-Fox news hosts, like they include that as well. Like I said, this film is more relevant now than ever, So, geez. One thing that I did notice, I take a note of, was there was a lot of phallic symbols in this movie. And it starts right from the get-go. Like
the footage of the plane refueling.
Yes, the nose of the plane and the refueling nozzle of the jet airplane. And then you've got like Sterling Hayden's cigar and that huge machine gun that he's got, and like the missiles itself and everything. Like it's definitely a theme, I think, and predominant throughout the film, right? It wasn't just me picking this up.
Yeah. It was all deliberate. There's no question.
Clearly.
Again, the movie's so old that there's so much that's been written about it. I had to really pick and choose sort of like, what kind of homework am I doing for this podcast? And yeah, there's a lot where they talked about like the sexual imagery and the phallic symbols and just the little, and like some of the things where I was reading, I was like, wow, this went over my head during the viewing, but it's there. You watch it again and you're like, it's there. And they're like, Kubrick is talented enough that this isn't an accident. Like it's all these things were deliberate choices made. And the fact that you don't notice all of them the first time through, that just speaks to his ability. Yeah.
So one of the things we like to do, we always like to take a look at the cast. And I think the cast in this film is one of the strongest parts of the movie. It's absolutely. It's cast so well. So we'll start with Peter Sellers. One of the most original and uniquely talented actors, I think, in movie history, I would say.
Yeah. So good.
He played 2 roles in Kubrick's Lolita in like 1962. And I think most people know him for playing Inspector Clouseau in the Pink Panther
movie. Yeah, I would
movie,
think so, in the Pink Panther.
Because that was from that lasted a while. He started in 1963 and they went right till 1978. And he did a lot of physical comedy in those Pink Panther movies. But he had this ability to mimic bizarre characters and do like accents that really, I think, set him apart. But he totally immersed himself in his characters. He once said that he had no personality of his own outside of the characters that he portrayed, which I thought was interesting. He was definitely a bit of a tormented soul, I think, because his ex-wife, Britt Eklund, once described him that way. He died at 54 years old of a heart attack, but he was nominated for Best Actor twice for being there, and also for this film he was nominated.
Yeah. He absolutely got robbed for being there. He should have won. I just watched that for the first time like a few months back. And if you have the chance to see this, I mean, I know our listeners probably aren't like, I'm going back to watch these classic movies, but like this one's from 1979.
79, yeah.
It's fantastic. And he has never been better. He was robbed. He earned that Oscar. And I read a bunch of behind the scenes stuff on that movie too. And like the critics agree. Yeah. Like he got robbed. Of course, he had died by then, so it would have been a posthumous award, which probably played into the, do we award it to the dead guy or do we award it to someone who's still around? But yeah. And another great Sellers performance that I always enjoyed is The Party from 1968. Right. Again, just so good.
I think with being there, I think the thing is like Hollywood, the Academy, especially when it comes to the Oscars, they glom onto a certain movie in a certain year and then just heap everything on it. And then that year it was Kramer versus Kramer. with Dustin Hoffman. That was the thing. But I agree, he should have had more consideration. I want to talk about Sterling Hayden because I'm watching this and I always think of him in his later years when he's got like the mustache and the goatee. He was in 9 to 5, which is one of my favorite movies of all time. And we reviewed it here on the show last year. He was Tinsworthy. He was the chairman of the board in that movie.
Oh, okay.
And he was in this little Canadian movie in 81 called Gas. In both of those movies, he had like that goatee. And he almost looked like Colonel Sanders thing going on or something, just with a longer beard. So that's how I always think of him. I
was thinking of him from The Godfather, where he's the corrupt police captain that Michael shoots in the restaurant through the throat.
Oh, right in the neck it gets. Oh, geez, crazy. Yeah. But in this movie, he's clean shaven. So it threw me off, but his voice is so recognizable.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if you know this. He was Spielberg's first choice to play Quint in Jaws.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah. I thought he was really good in this movie. The whole obsession he has with bodily fluids.
Yeah.
Jeez. Even that's, and the scene too, I thought was interesting. Right before he takes his own life, when he realizes they're getting surrounded and stuff, the interaction between him and Sellers as Mandrake. Mm-hmm. It's almost got this like homoerotic vibe going on.
Yeah.
And he just keeps talking about his bodily fluids and stuff. Mm-hmm. And then at one point he starts talking about the fluoridation of the water and how it started in 1946. He's like, it's right after the war. Must be a communist takeover thing. They're trying to poison the water. One thing, again, saying how this film is just as relevant today. Wackadoodle conspiracy theorists have been around for a while, and they still are around today. So I thought his character was interesting.
I was reading that whole thing about the chlorine in the water. Yeah. Like there was a fringe group that genuinely that felt that conspiracy theory was real. Like I was reading up on it. It's so bizarre, yet you totally believe it. Again, you're looking at the world today. You're like, yeah, I can see how some people would think that. I don't agree with them, but I could see, groups believing that and people just latching onto it. And they said the thing that it was based on, there was like whole communities and counties and townships that made it illegal to chlorinate the water. And anyone who felt that it was a good thing could be charged with a crime. It's like, wow, like the super extremism. It was just like, wow, it's just. But again, crazy. Going
back to this, you could watch it at the time and think, how ridiculous. But I mean, there's people today that believe this kind of stuff. And social media has just made it worse. Mm-hmm. The internet and social media and all access to this information is supposed to have made us smarter, not dumber. What the heck's going on? Yeah. I want to mention Keenan Wynn. I want to give him a shout out. He was the soldier that came and captured Mandrake. Because he's one of my all-time favorite movies. He was in Piranha in 1978, so I just had to give him a shout out. And we got to talk about James Earl Jones too. Really small part. This is his first feature film.
Yeah, actually. I read that. Yeah.
Yeah, this is before he did Dr. Kildare or The Great White Hope or Star Wars or any of that stuff. So that he was good. Got to mention Slim Pickens.
Oh yeah, he's so good.
Probably the most iconic scene of the film when he rides the nuclear bomb to his death. Yeah. And ultimately the death of all mankind. But his voice, oh my gosh. This is one guy. He technically never had to act a day in his life. He just played himself, Yeah. Exactly. He'd show up to set in like a cowboy hat with his southern drawl. It was just his natural voice. I think most people know him from Blazing Saddles.
Yeah, of course. That's right.
Riding into town, whooping and a whooping everything within an inch of his life. He's got that great voice,
So I was reading that when they got him, so originally apparently Peter Sellers was supposed to play that role, but he couldn't get the Texas accent down right, and he was already doing 3 roles. So they called in this guy, and when they called in Slim Pickens to play the role, they didn't tell him it was supposed to be a comedy or a satire. They just gave him his parts of the script, like the scenes he was in, and so
he just played it
straight. So he played it straight, and that's what they said. He played it straight. He had no idea that the film was supposed to be a comedy or a satire, and apparently because he had never left the continental U.S. And the film was being shot in London, it took a while for him to get the proper paperwork to get his passport approved. So again, all of the scenes with him were shot at the very end. So it's not even like he heard the buzz around the set, because it's like all the other scenes were done. So and knowing that, the next time I go back and watch it, I'm gonna definitely keep that in mind. But yeah, no, I thought he was great in this.
But that actually makes the film work better because you've got all this inanity and humor going on, especially in the war room, and then his scenes in the bomber, played straight and are quite serious, and actually it gives it a bit of a bit more gravity to those scenes and how serious of what's going on there. Like, this is not good. You know, if they go ahead with this could be the end of mankind. And so I think it all kind of plays out really, really well. So
I like the choice that Kubrick made early in the film once they realize what's going on. So they have his character put on the cowboy hat. And while it works because clearly he's just a good old boy wearing his cowboy hat and all the rest of it, you've got all of these essentially, faceless, nameless soldiers on the plane that all essentially look the same. So by giving this guy the cowboy hat, we as the audience can clearly pick him out of the rest of the group. Now, he's clearly the pilot and he seems to be the most senior officer on this craft. So again, he's the character in charge, but it's like in the new Star Wars movies with where what's his name, Finn is the stormtrooper, and you have that guy like with the bloody hand put his bloody handprint on his white stormtrooper outfit, so that you as the audience could be like, well, there's 100 stormtroopers, how do I know who's who? Oh, I'm looking for the guy that's got the mark on it. It was a smart choice creatively. I found that you have him put on the cowboy hat right at the beginning once things start going wrong, and it was just an easy tell that you always knew, is this the guy? Yes, it is. So no, I thought it's a subtle choice, but I think it was important, and I think it worked really, really well.
I agree. So one guy I want to talk about is George C. Scott.
Of course.
I'm watching this and I'm like, how the hell was he not nominated for an Oscar for Best Supporting Actor here? He might have had the best performance in the entire film. His facial expressions, and the intonation,
and the
in
line
his
deliveries.
Voice.
Oh my God!
And it's all so over the top. But the thing is, I feel like a lesser actor would have just been chewing scenery.
Yeah,
but he just pulls it off. It's like masterfully, So apparently, I was looking into it. He didn't want to do it quite so over the top. So Kubrick convinced him to do a take that was outlandish as a warm up. And then we'll do another take that's toned down. And then Kubrick went ahead and used all the over-the-top takes and put them all together. And I read that George C. Scott was furious with him.
At first.
Yeah. And he was like, I'll never work with him again, But it made for an amazing performance. And I think he kind of came around, after that and kind of saw it and was like, oh. But man, he was something else in this role. Again, just even the thing is, in film, especially when you do close-ups, you generally want to tone it down a bit, and if you overdo it, even with your facial expressions and stuff, it comes off as like sophomore. It's too much. It's over the top.
Yeah.
But he does it all so well. Like, he puts it all together in this package. It's just, he was great.
Well, by contrast, we look back at the guy, the General Ripper, who's the guy with the cigar. He did exactly what you just said. When he's got all those close-up scenes, it's like it's very serious. It's very toned down. Even the volume of his voice is down a little bit. Like you said, there's a traditional way to shoot those scenes, and his scenes follow that pattern. George C. Scott scenes, out the window. Let's just do it differently. Like, it's such a contrast.
And they don't share any screen time together, but he does share screen time with Peter Sellers as the president, and the president's like that. He's very much more subdued, so it really plays off really well. So one thing, I was making a note of some of the names of the characters and stuff in this film, like ridiculous. So there's Jack D. Ripper, that's Sterling Hayden, I guess.
Yep.
Turgison, which reminded me of Turd Ferguson from Celebrity Jeopardy. Remember that? That's what I came to my mind. Like Mandrake, there's Burpelson Air Force Base. Kiss Off is the Russian guy. Kong, Bat Guano, and even the president is Merkin Muffley. Yep. Like, just crazy names, for these characters. Again, I guess just to add to the absurdity of it all and the humor. So, speaking of humor, I thought this movie was really funny. Oh my gosh.
It had a lot of humor. A lot of subtle humor too, where it's like, if you get the joke, you get the joke. And if you don't, the movie just plays through. It's like,
There was times I was actually like laughing out loud at it.
Oh yeah.
So I like the scene when George C. Scott is talking to someone off camera, and they're talking about like 17,000 permutations of the 3-digit code. And he's like, it's going to take us 2.5 days to transmit all of these combinations of the codes to try and figure it out. And they're like, well, how much time till the planes hit their targets? 18 minutes, sir. I just started laughing. I'm like, okay, this is not going to go well. And then when George C. Scott is reading the message from Sterling Hayden that comes across the wire or something like that, and he's like, God willing, we will prevail and maintain the purity of our fluids. I just started laughing at that. It was so funny. And then even when they're basically like deriding George C. Scott's character for this happening, and he's like, I don't think it's fair to condemn an entire program just because of one single slip up, sir. Yeah. Like the slip up is like total human annihilation. Like, oh my God.
But that just feels so military. Like, again, I work for a huge corporation, and I hear stuff like that all the time. It's like, one of my favorite lines in the movie is when the Russian ambassador, he accuses him of having the little camera. He's like, he's in here taking pictures with this little camera, and they're like having a little row, and then the president comes over and goes, gentlemen, there's no fighting. This is the war room.
Yeah, there's no fighting in the war room. What a great line. Yeah. I like when George C. Scott also he gets a phone call. And then he kind of takes it, and it's from his mistress. She's calling him in the war room. Yeah. And he's like, I told you never to call me here.
But I love that he still gave her the number.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was really laughing when Slim Pickens is reading out the contents of the ration kits. Yes. He's like, there's chewing gum, $100 in rubles, $100 in gold, food packets, medicine, prophylactics, lipstick, pantyhose. A fella could have a hell of a time in Vegas with this stuff. It's like, jeez, God. And then like the part you mentioned when Mandrake's trying to call the president and doesn't have 55 cents for the payphone. Yeah. So he asked Keenan Wynn to shoot open the Coke machine. He's like, get some coins out for the call. And Keenan Wynn's line is so good. He's like, if you don't get the president of the United States on the phone, you know what's going to happen? You're going to have to answer to the Coca-Cola company. I was like laughing. It was so good. Oh man. I
like, so back in my Blockbuster days, this is a movie that they promoted a fair bit on their trailers. And they used to show the scene where the president is on the phone with the Russian president, and he's trying to explain what happened. And he goes, well, Dmitry, let me tell you what happened. One of our guys, he went a little funny in the head, just a little funny. It's just like, every time I hear that line, again, just because of his delivery, it's just so flat, so monotone. And it's like, he knows he's going to be the straight man in these scenes, and everyone else around him is going to get to do the funny things. It's just like the delivery of the lines. And the fact that...
So I want to jump in there. Yeah. You know what I liked about that scene too? Was how all the rest of the actors are just standing there. And they're not moving at all. Yeah. It's like they're part of the scenery, like of a painting in the background, just to give the whole scene a look. I thought that was interesting in that scene when he's talking to Dmitry.
Well, and one of the things, and this to me is always a sign of a good writer, is when we, the audience, are only hearing half of the conversation over the phone, yet you have no doubt that you have understood exactly what the person on the other end is saying, based on the reaction and based on what the next line is. There's no doubt. And I've seen this 100 times in shows, and this often goes very poorly. The writers overdo it, and they feel that the person that we are watching has to repeat everything. Oh, what's that you say? 6 o'clock? Oh, you want me to meet you at 6 o'clock at this place? It's like, come on, nobody would do that. But when it's done well, like it is in this film, he just says what he has to say. And he doesn't repeat what the other person is saying for us, the audience. We just know. And it's done so well. And there are so many scenes where that happens, where the person picks up the phone, again, those old school phones with the actual attached cables. And again, you just hear you just hear one side of it, but you know exactly, without any doubt, what is being said on the other end, and it works. It's great.
Oh, there's that part when George C. Scott is like looking back at the president and he's going over to the board and he trips and he falls and he gets up and he still gives his line. Like, that was obviously a mistake. He tripped, and Kubrick left it in the film, which I thought was really, really cool. Mm-hmm. I really liked that.
It just humanizes him so much when stuff like that happens. And the fact that he's such a consummate professional, he just kept doing it, kept on going. I'm just going to continue my line, and we're doing this scene.
So we mentioned Peter Sellers plays lots of different characters. And then there's obviously the titular character, Dr. Strangelove, and he does like this Nazi salute. And so, although I guess in today's days, it's called a Roman salute. That's something else we learned from the current administration south of the border, my friend. And then he even calls the president Mein Führer.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you noticed the scene when he's trying to control his arm and he's like slapping his arm down and he's going nuts. You can see the Russian ambassador behind him starts cracking up.
Yeah.
I noticed it. I was like, oh my God, that actor's cracking up because clearly Sellers is improvising this whole thing.
Yeah.
So I thought that was interesting. And then I like how they argue so much about their plans to go underground and repopulate the earth with like 10-to-1 women to men and all this stuff. And will the men be able to be with more women and this and of course they keep talking about this. So they miss their chance and the doomsday bombs go off and they all die. Mm-hmm. It's just, what an ending to the film.
Yeah. I
don't know how he got away with making that as the ending when like basically everyone dies. I don't know, but he, I'm sure it didn't go over well with test audiences. I don't know, but he left it in and stuff. I thought it was quite good. So, anything else you want to talk about for the film before we wrap her up?
No, I mean, I like that it was just over 90 minutes. I think it was like a 92-minute runtime or something.
Wasn't too long.
That was great. And that I find with some of these older movies, many of them have a 2-hour runtime, and you'll watch them with today's, and
Kubrick's films tend to be long. Some of them,
and you'll watch some of them and you're just like, I don't want to critique these guys, but I would have cut out 20 minutes. But this one, I feel everything that's in there needs to be in there. I didn't feel like I was missing anything. I think the 90-minute runtime is perfect. And I think that's probably a big part of why it was as successful as it was, in addition to it being just a great film, is people were willing to give it a chance. And so I think for anyone who's listening to this podcast who maybe has heard of the movie and never actually sat down to watch it, hopefully our discussion has given you some motivation to do so. It's not long. It's 90 minutes. Yep. And I did find, though, like so many of these older movies, I had to really be mindful about not having a second screen out. I literally put my phone far enough away that I couldn't reach it while I was watching the movie. And once I was in 15 or 20 minutes, I wasn't reaching for the phone at all. I was just watching the movie. But again, these old ones sometimes take a little bit to get cooking, and this one sort of just hits it right out of the gate. So no, I really. One other
thing I was thinking about that came to mind, how Kubrick uses sound. Like when he does the war room shots, when he does the wide shot of the table with the big light overhead, he uses more of an ambient sound in the room. It's almost like echoing. Mm-hmm. And then when it goes into close-ups, that goes away. You can just hear the actors talking like they're mic'd properly. And then as soon as he does a wide shot, it's echoey again. I thought it was a real interesting choice, and it just works. So again, Kubrick, even back then, was already really showing his chops as a director, I thought. So,
oh yeah, for sure.
But I agree with you. It's nice that they did keep it under sort of a 3-hour runtime, because he has broken the 3-hour barrier on more than one occasion as a director. So do you want to give it a rating out of 10? What do you got?
Give it a 9 out of 10 all day long. I could probably be talked into a 9.5, but I'm going to stick with the 9.
I'm going to go 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah. No,
yeah, that's what I think
it's solid.
Yeah, it was. And again,
it's a classic for a reason.
Yeah, I just can't believe I'd never seen it, and it's something I was always very aware about. I know the movie, I've heard of it, but just never had the chance to see it. I spend all my time watching these 80s comedies, and that's kind of the way I am. And, there's that. So, nope, I thought it was great. Fantastic. Really, really glad that I saw it. And so 9.5 out of 10 for me. All right, let's do this.
Fun with Caveman.
Okay, we're going to go in a bit of a different direction. The Oscars were held recently, Derek. So I want to do something related to that. So
okay.
I want to do some trivia regarding Oscar-winning songs. Okay? So here's how it works.
It's going to be rough.
It's easy. I'm going to give you the title of a song. All you have to do is name the movie it comes from. And to make it easy, every single song on this list won the Oscar for Best Original Song.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so they should all be well known, okay? We're going to start with some easy ones. We're going to work your way up, all right? Over the Rainbow.
Wizard of Oz.
If there's any time that you need the year, I'll give you the year or two. Okay. All right. So we just did Over the Rainbow. Let's go Under the Sea.
Oh, that's the mermaid movie, The Little Mermaid.
How about Can You Feel the Love Tonight?
That was a Disney one too, right? That was that The Lion King?
Needless to say, there's going to be a lot of Disney films.
Yeah, no kidding.
in this trivia tonight. All right. Chim Chim Cheree.
Well, that was Mary Poppins.
Sure was. Same year as this movie, 1964. Okay, yep. I've Had the Time of My Life.
Oh, that was Patrick Swayze. Oh my God, I'm blanking on it. Dirty Dancing.
How about Zippity Doo Dah? What film was Zippity Doo Dah?
Oh,
did that song win the Best Oscar or for Best Original Song?
It had to be a Disney one. Was it
1947?
I was gonna say was it Pinocchio?
It was Song of the South. Song of the South.
I never would have got that.
How about When You Wish Upon a Star?
That one's Pinocchio.
Yes.
If you give me that one first, I wouldn't have guessed. Still would have got the other one right, but I wouldn't have guessed Pinocchio.
The Best That You Can Do.
The Best That You Can Do. I'm going to need the year, please.
1981. The Best That You Can Do.
Wow. Got to be a sports movie if the title of the song is that or something. Part of me wants to say Rocky, but I know that wouldn't be it. You know what? I don't know.
The best that you can do is fall in love.
Oh, geez, that's Arthur.
Arthur, yes. Okay, how about Up Where We Belong?
That was an Officer and Gentleman.
Yeah.
You had me watch that one.
I did. I really liked that movie a lot. Okay, Let It Go.
What year?
2013. Little new for my liking.
Let It Go. Oh, was it one of the Disney ones? The one with the snow woman. What the hell was that one called? Oh my God. Frozen?
Oh. All right.
I wanted to say the Ice Princess. And I'm like, that was wrong, but I knew it was something like that.
I don't think there's even a movie called The Ice Princess. So, Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head.
That is Butch Cassidy, Sundance Kid.
How about A Whole New World?
Oh, that's a Disney one too. That's like in the 90s, right? 90. Is that in the 90s?
92.
Oh yeah, okay. What was the name of the song again?
A Whole New World.
Yeah, that's Aladdin, right? Yeah. I was gonna say Aladdin and the Lamp, but I'm like, no, that's not what it's called.
What Was I Made For?
Oh, that was from Barbie. That was just a couple of years ago.
Good. Yeah. And the last one, It's Hard Out Here for a Pimp. And just a hint, this song was written for me.
I know it was the 3 6 Mafia. Was it from Hustle and Flow?
Oh. Have you seen that movie?
I have not. But
it's actually very good.
I'm a huge fan of like hardcore gangsta rap.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sure you are. Yes.
You may be the OG, but you know.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's why I said that song was written for me. Yeah, but no, I remember Terrence Howard was the name of the actor. Yep. God, he was good in that movie. God, that movie was good. Okay, so you did really well. I think you missed one or two.
Dude. Yeah, I think
you were a little worried going into it, but you did great.
Well, once I realized they were all the Disney movies, the problem was those ones in the 90s. I'm like, I hadn't seen most of those ones, but I knew the songs at least. I thought you were going to ask me, like, who sang them? Which would have been a big thing.
We just kept it nice and easy.
There we go. Appreciate that.
All right, so next time out, we'll do a topic, I guess. So we'll determine what that'll be, and we'll come back and do that. So until then, I'm Chris McBrien on behalf of myself and Derek Myers. And of course, our producer Sloth, want to say thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World, the pop culture podcast for the generations.
Thanks for listening to Pop Goes Your World. You can contact Chris and Derek at popgoesyourworld.com. Please take a minute and review the podcast on iTunes or wherever you download and listen to the show.